In 1983, Sally Ride became the first U.S. woman to go to space. She did so in a time when sexism and discriminatory policies were commonplace. Her achievement immediately inspired a generation of girls and women and influences cultural norms and gender bias to this day. This historic event sparked public debate over women's rights to hold jobs that are traditionally reserved for men. Sally Ride was born May 26, 1951 in California. She was a normal girl who grew up in a loving family with her mother, father, sister, and dog. She was an accomplished tennis player and very interested in math and science from a young age. She excelled in school and went on to attend Stanford University, where she completed her PhD in astrophysics. On January 12, 1977, while a student at Stanford, she picked up a copy of the Stanford Daily and noticed a headline, NASA to recruit women. She sent in her application forms, and lo and behold, she was accepted. She and 5 other women were chosen out of 8,000 applicants. She was in the first group of Americans selected for spaceflight that included women and minorities. Ride trained with NASA for 5 years prior to the flight, yet the pressure was still on. She was held to a higher level of scrutiny than her male counterparts, especially by the press. Prior to the flight, she was constantly asked sexist questions as, if she cried under pressure, what type of makeup she was taking up, if going to space would affect her reproductive organs, or if she wished she were a boy.
I'm curious about the reception that you got inside NASA. Well, what kind of thing happened to you?
Really, the only bad moments in our training involved the press. The press was an added pressure on the flight for me, and whereas NASA appeared to be very enlightened about flying women astronauts, the press didn't appear to be. The things that they were concerned with were not the same things that I was concerned with.
For instance, the bathroom facilities.
Bathroom facilities.
How much did you get asked that?
Just about every interview I got asked that. Everybody wanted to know about what kind of makeup I was taking up. They didn't care about how well prepared I was to operate the arm or deploy communication satellites.
Did NASA try to prepare you for the press and the pressure?
Unfortunately, no, they don't. You know, in my case, they took a graduate student in physics who had spent her life in the basement of a physics department with oscilloscopes and suddenly put me in front of the press.
What do you suppose are the dumbest kinds of questions you've been asked to date?
Without a doubt, I think the worst question that I have gotten was whether I cried when we got malfunctions in the simulator.
No. Although Sally was constantly asked rude and sexist questions, she never lost her cool. With great diplomacy, she skillfully steered the conversation back to what mattered, mission and her qualifications. Though some people still didn't believe that Sally would be strong enough or that her gender would affect her training.
I know you've had a lot of questions about being the first woman and a lot of dumb questions in press conferences. I've heard them all. I can't imagine how you survived them. But is there any way that being a woman and an astronaut has made any difference, either positively or negatively or in any kind of funny ways, that you're willing to talk about?
I really don't think that there is any aspect of the training or of the flight where it's made any difference that there have been women astronauts on the crew or not. Our training is really asexual. You know, the women and the men go through exactly the same training. The women and the men do exactly the same jobs on orbit, and weightlessness is a great equalizer. You don't need to be strong to do things up there, and there is really no difference.
Yet Sally did not crack under the pressure and stayed strong. On June 18, 1983, it was official. Sally Ride and the rest of the crew were now ready to lift off.
She was grinning with excitement even before she left the Earth, even before the crowds here chanted, "Ride, Sally, ride," as Challenger took its supercharged journey into space.
And liftoff of STS-7 and America's first woman astronaut. And the shuttle has cleared the tower.
It was a perfect launch into the history books, as Challenger once again charged into the sky and gently rolled over, carrying not only Sally Ride, but 4 other male astronauts towards orbit.
Sally Ride was on the flight STS-7, and the point of the mission was to deploy 2 communication satellites. This mission was a huge success. Ride was a mission specialist who operated the robotic arm, which was a highly technical piece of equipment used to release satellites into space. Sally and the crew trained with simulators for an entire year prior to liftoff. They needed to know how to operate everything flawlessly. After all, the robotic arm was an $100 million flying crane. Ride being on the flight inspired millions of girls and women. The flight seemed to have inspired others because some people watching the launch were crying. While Ride was in space, some people down on Earth had their own debates about a woman being in space. For example, the editorial cartoon Laundry Day, featured in the June 24, 1983 Chicago Tribune, showcased Sally Ride doing laundry on the shuttle as if this was her only contribution to the mission. This cartoon was not appreciated by some of the public. In letters to the editor, one wrote, "The Tribune owes Sally Ride an apology for the degrading and insulting cartoon." Or, Sally Ride earned her place in the space program as a qualified, dedicated specialist, not as the in-flight domestic help. While Sally faced sexism, especially by the press, she also received an overwhelming amount of public support, such as the road sign in Florida that says, "Ride, Sally, ride," and you guys can tag along too. Though sexist remarks were still being made, such as this attempt at a joke from the late-night host Johnny Carson. As you can see, it didn't go over well with the audience. Sally Ride being on that flight immediately showed women of all ages that they were able to pursue careers in science and math. This opened doors and showed them that they too could be an astronaut of any job they wanted as long as they were qualified. This ideal was evident in President Reagan's phone call to the crew on June 24, 1983, when he told Sally, "Somebody said that sometimes the best man for a job was a woman. You were there because you were the best person for the job." Ride also made her way onto Sesame Street to get kids more excited about science.
Hey, do you all know who this person is here? Yeah. You do? What's her name?
Sally Ride.
Yeah, good. What kind of stuff did you do once you got up there?
We did a lot of different things. We carried a couple satellites up into space, and we released them, put them up, we carried them up in the shuttle, and then we took them out of the shuttle and left them on their own up in space. They're still up there now. We ran a lot of experiments. We had one experiment to make medicines that you can't make.
Sally Ride left NASA and returned to Stanford as a professor in physics. She also created her own math and science curriculum, Sally Ride Science. Her passion was to make kids starry-eyed about science and math, especially girls. There's nothing more important for middle school girls to be normal. So you have to think it's normal for a girl to go into environmental engineering, environmental science, biochemistry, or astronomy. Ride says, "To this day there are still so many stereotypes about girls in science." This is a clip of Sally giving a speech at one of her science conventions.
I always dreamed of flying in space, and unbelievably, still can't believe it to this day, that dream came true for me. And I know that through your imagination and your dedication and your hard work and creativity, that all of you will be able to reach for the stars and achieve your dreams too. Thanks a lot.
Sally Ride and her partner also wrote children's books together and organized Sally Ride Science. Even though Sally's flight was almost 39 years ago, there are still gender gaps at NASA, and women are still the minority. Sally Ride passed away July 23, 2012, after a 17-month-long fight with pancreatic cancer. As the first American woman to travel into space, Sally was a national hero and a powerful role model. She inspired generations of young girls to reach the stars and later fought tirelessly to help them get there by advocating for a greater focus on science and math in our schools, President Barack Obama said in the statement released by the White House. Sally's legacy wasn't being the first American woman in space. It was how many girls she inspired that day and continues to inspire to this day.